Right, before we get started today, let's give a big shout out to the sponsors of the True Geordie YouTube channel, Young LA. Don't forget, you can get something for every occasion on Young LA's website. I mean, literally, if you go into the gym, you're going out, there's all sorts on the Young LA website. For example, I'm thinking about picking up this t-shirt because I think it's class. And if you want to get anything on the Young LA website, click the link in the description below. Use code TRUE for 15% off. All right, welcome back. And I'm sure, as a lot of you have heard by now, the guy, Jason Arday, the professor from Cambridge, who we covered in our last video, has been found dead. According to the BBC website here, a man was found unresponsive at an address in Battersea, London on Friday afternoon. Apparently, the death is being treated as unexpected but not believed to be suspicious. Obviously, a lot of people are suggesting he took his own life, which I think, given all the circumstances, is very likely to be the case. And I have to admit, when I heard this news, I was like, fuck, man. Like, yeah, it was a bad situation. Yeah, you fucked up. Was it that bad? You know, yeah, it was a scandal. We've seen loads of scandals where people have carried on with their life, and like, I get at the time things feel like the end of the fucking world, but like, apparently he had kids, and like, there's so much left to go on for. Like, it's just hard to wrap your head around. And as much as I criticize the guy for the mistakes he made, no one would ever have wanted this to have this kind of sad ending. It's a real shame. And look, there's a lot of blame being thrown around on social media, as you can expect at this point. You know, this was a highly politically driven story. People on either side are obviously attacking each other. And even I've had people like suggesting that I should feel bad for covering the story in the first place. I'm like, I cover loads of stories. This is like never happened before. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think my criticisms of him were really reasonable. I stand by every word I said. I made one video. I never planned on speaking about it ever again. You know, I wasn't trying to do a pile-on or anything like that. It was big news. That's what I do. And look, there is a lot of people accusing the mainstream media of hounding him, and we're going to get into all of that today, because I think that's an important part of the story now. But if anyone's trying to suggest in the comments that that one video from True Geordie, the YouTuber, is what tipped them over the edge when, you know, the entire mainstream media were talking about him, you need to have a word with yourself. You know, we can't be expected to just not cover things in case someone does something to themselves. That would be ridiculous. No one would report any news. But I think the amount of coverage this got is a definite talking point for today. And the tricky thing with this topic for me is that when someone dies, naturally, we feel sorry for them. Like, how could you not, right? That for someone to want to take their own life, the natural instinct is to refrain from criticism and almost romanticize who they were, because that's what people do when people die, right? You want to speak well of them. But I think you can both feel bad about the situation and also be honest about how someone behaved in their life. And on this channel, I'm always real, and I'm always going to be real. So that's how I'm going to do this. Now, there was a statement released from the publisher of his book who said that Jason was subjected to a campaign of sustained abuse for more than 3 years since he accepted the role of professor at Cambridge University by those who would leave no stone unturned in their quest to undermine him. And they go on to say that the campaign of misinformation was too much for Jason, who was a gentleman and always wanted to see the best in everyone. Now, I think it's highly ironic that they've kind of doubled down and been like, well, it was a campaign of misinformation about him. I mean, the only misinformation about Jason Arday was coming from Jason Arday. That's obvious. And look, for those who didn't watch the first video, I will give you a little quick recap of what the situation is here. Jason Arday became the youngest black professor in Cambridge history after plagiarizing on his PhD in order to become a professor in the first place. And he plagiarized a whole bunch more than that even. Now, the plagiarism scandal was the thing that opened people's eyes to the fact that this guy wasn't the perfect person that they put him across as. But really, that was just the entry point into the entire life of lies that he'd created. If this was just a plagiarism scandal, like, it would have been here today, gone tomorrow. It was far more than that. And when people did uncover his lies, he would attack them using the law, using solicitors, any means necessary to try and silence them. And when it came to his lying, it was calculated. It wasn't just lying for the sake of it. He understood perfectly well, the bigger the sob story, the more doors would open for him. So he lied about growing up with severe autism, being unable to speak for the majority of his upbringing, because he knew people would feel sorry for him and therefore they would trust him. And then he would manipulate them for personal gain. And this massive story he concocted about not being able to speak until he was 11, not being able to read and write till he was 18, which changed depending on, when he was asked in the timeline. There was a TV show he was on at one point. He learned how to read and write at 16. But by him having those challenges and then going on to get a PhD, it made him a real life miracle, which not only made him amazing, but it gave him a protective shield almost of like, okay, well, you can't criticize me because of my race and the fact that I have a disability. And he used those two things to his advantage constantly. If anyone questioned him, they were racist or they were ableist immediately. And look, they were the like entry lies that they immediately got people's attention with. There's like a whole list here, and I'm literally scrolling down. I mean, how long have we got? It's insane. We could do a 3-hour video on this. Before he got his PhD, they found out he had a brain tumor and they operated on him like 3 weeks before he had to take his PhD exam. He then claimed he had a stroke right before the exam, which he forgot all of the information and somehow had to still manage to get his PhD. There was a car accident that really should have killed him. He was suffering from locked-in syndrome, where the doctors told his parents to switch the life support machine off, and just before they switched the life support machine off, he miraculously woke up again. Again, the kind of stories that make people feel empathy for you. There was also stories which made people admire him. He claimed he raised £5.5 million for kids' charities and stuff like that. Never happened. Oh, I ran 600 miles in 6 days. Just absolute bollocks. And some of those miles were with a broken leg. It was weird, man. It was so crazy uncovering all this. Claimed he was held up at knife point in Cambridge Uni. No CCTV, no nothing. He didn't report any of that. Never happened. He claimed he was on a TV show as a kid, which took place like 25 years before he would have been able to even be on it. Said he was like a prodigy football player for Crystal Palace, an elite snooker player, all around the age where apparently he couldn't even talk. And even though he couldn't read and write, he still got GCSEs. And obviously he lied about his CV and saying that he went to America and he was this special uni professor over there. He never even went there. We could be here all day talking about all the crazy lies he told. And ultimately, why did he lie? Because it benefited him. He ended up in a position where he was the youngest black professor in Cambridge history when he wasn't even qualified to teach the subject that he was teaching there. They overlooked all of that because they specifically wanted someone who was a diverse candidate to hire, and therefore it didn't matter that he wasn't qualified. With that story behind him, with the diversity, with the fact that he was neurodiverse, he was the dream candidate. It got him a great salary, it got him a whole bunch of paid speaking engagements, which would have been expensive. They even gave him a £1.4 million book deal. At least that's what he claimed. Maybe that was a lie as well, but there was definitely a book coming out, and it got him a whole bunch of media attention, including putting him on the BBC. This video has 4.7 million views.
I always felt it was a privilege to have a period of 11 years where maybe I couldn't speak and I couldn't converse in a way that everyone else could, because it allowed me to see things in a different way.
Professor Jason Arday was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder at the age of 3. He couldn't speak until he was 11 and read or write until he was 18.
And that original lie about having autism, when I spoke about that in the first video, I didn't really fully understand the damage that some of these lies did, especially that one. But after I put the video out, I was actually contacted by multiple parents of autistic children, and they really opened my eyes to that, because they told me that their kids couldn't talk, just like the way Jason Arday described his first 11 years of his life. And they were devastated to learn that this was all a lie, because his story had given them so much hope for their own children. You think about it, thousands and thousands of parents of autistic children had heard this story about the kid who couldn't speak till he was 11 becoming a professor at Cambridge University. It gave them all hope that they'd never had before, because this was a miracle. This was possible. And you've got to imagine the reality that these people live, right? Every single day they're looking after this child that can't talk to them. They don't know what their child is thinking. If their child, for example, as one of them described, is in pain, they can't tell you where the pain's coming from, why it's happening, what happened to get that pain in their body. You can't just help them. You've got to figure it out. When their kid goes to school, they can't have a conversation when they pick the kid up from school saying, how was your day? Did you have a good day? And so many of those parents who are living a really, really hard life were given hope by a man who used that disability to make his own life story sound more amazing. I don't think he gave a shit that he was giving these people false hope. I don't think he cared at all. I mean, think about it. Who the fuck lies about having a disability like that? It's not a good thing to do, is it? Fuck me. But it benefited him. And he sat there glorifying how great it was to have 11 years without speaking, because it made him see the world differently. This is something that causes a lot of pain to a lot of children and adults who are looking after these kids around the world. And he just wanted to use it to make himself look like he was living a Hollywood movie. And hearing how gutted, and I mean gutted, the parents were who found out it was all a lie, it really made me understand what a scumbag move that was from him. And whether you're dead or alive, your behaviour was bang out of order. That's disgusting. Pulling on people's heartstrings like that, it's so wrong. That for me is so much worse than the fucking plagiarism. I could care less about the plagiarism. Is it wrong? Yeah. It's hardly grievous bodily harm, is it? He plagiarized from multiple academics throughout the years, and he wasn't smart like he claimed he was. Like, obviously. It's out of order. But again, if that was the only thing he did, it would have been here today, gone tomorrow. The guy lied about raising $5.5 million for children's charities, for fuck's sake. That's another really low move that I don't know anyone who would lie about something like that. That's just so dark. And when a professor and a journalist both uncovered that he'd plagiarized and were raising the alarm on him, he reported them to the police. He said they were harassing him, and then he got solicitors to send letters. And the solicitor's letter that went to the journalist's company, the employer of the journalist, who was asking him questions like, what's going on here? That letter accused him of being racially motivated in his questioning of Jason Arday. So his solicitors were saying to that journalist employer, your journalist is a racist, trying to get him fired. That's not a stretch. When you say to someone, your employee is a racist, you're trying to get them fired. And when the allegations first surfaced, Cambridge came out and were like, oh, this is all racially motivated, accusing people who were rightly questioning this stuff of being racist again. He was more than happy to send the police, the lawyers, after people who rightly raised concerns about his cheating and targeting them as racists. Those words can ruin someone's life, and he did not mind. He didn't care. Yes, he was guilty of what they were accusing him of. It didn't matter as long as he shut them up. And if their lives were ruined in the process, so be it. He didn't care. And I find it ironic that people were saying he was getting hounded towards the end of his life, because maybe that's true, but let's not act like sicking the police and the solicitors onto people isn't also hounding other people, especially for the reasons he was claiming, which weren't even true. And if the police had actually believed him, they would have locked someone up on his say-so, you know. Behind bars, in jail, for raising the alarm for his cheating. And he would have been fine with that. And this is where I think it's super important to just acknowledge this is who Jason Arday was. This is how he behaved in life. And I completely accept things got bad for him towards the end, but it's not just happened on its own, has it? He allowed politicians, colleagues, employers, all to stick up for him, saying this is all a big racist witch hunt and he's innocent, completely innocent, putting their reputations on the line, knowing fine well he was guilty the whole time. And when it all eventually came out, he knew all these people who were supporting him, defending him, going to bat for him, were all going to look fucking stupid, and their reputations were going to be impacted by it. Didn't care. Allowed them to do it anyway. And let's not forget about the students that he was teaching. What about them? Paying a fortune to be taught by this guy, completely unqualified, all because he talked his way into a job that he couldn't do. And this is fucking Cambridge. Like, this is the best of the best. These students have worked their arse off to get that opportunity to get to Cambridge. They're paying thousands of pounds for this education. And what came out about his teaching, it was shocking. Jason Arday taught me, here's what I learned. The song lyrics were the first red flag. The way he'd ramble about Tiny Temper or Eminem, or how black artists like Beyonce were sexualized by white men without offering any evidence to substantiate his claims. That was something I touched on a lot in the first episode about this guy. He never backed anything up because he never had to. Because he was trading off of his identity, he never had to come with any substance whatsoever. There'd also be film clips from Fish Tank and Kidulthood, which he'd tell us to discuss without offering any guidance on how to do so. And this was if he was even in the classroom at all. He often arrived late and left early, once teaching for a single hour when 4 hours were scheduled. When I first saw Jason Arday's name in the news, my first thought was, finally. The real surprise is that it didn't come out sooner. Before Arday arrived at Roehampton, university leaders enthusiastically told us of his amazing background story, how he learned to speak at 11 and write at 18, and how excited they were to have him teaching us. Naturally, we were all very interested to see the man himself, even if the module he'd be teaching had been written by a previous lecturer. I can only describe Arday's teaching as terrible. He rarely used PowerPoint. Instead, he'd sit there casually on a desk, giving his generalized views on racism without referring to any academic theories, let alone those relevant to the youth participation and identities module he was supposed to be teaching. But even more than his lectures, what really disappointed me was how Arday failed his students. Roehampton was a very diverse university, both in terms of racial background and and neurodiversity and takes inclusion seriously. More than 2/3 of the class were either black or from non-white backgrounds. Most were women, and most had come straight from sixth form as the first member of their families to attend university. At first, my classmates were charmed by Arday's cheerful attitude and inspirational stories to start with too. They were interested in his claims that white people were guilty of every kind of prejudice. Yet as the module progressed and he failed to turn up for yet another class, things began to change. It gradually dawned on us that we were learning nothing of substance and that much of his talk was nonsense. And look, I could be here all week because much like his lies, there's a million of these complaints about his lack of teaching ability. Any feedback he did give me was that my work was outstanding and that I didn't need any supervision. The student got a lower grade than they had expected and appealed to the university on the grounds of poor supervision, and that appeal was rejected. And look, it's bad enough that he was obviously only there to make Cambridge look good because diversity, but when the complaints came in from the students, they were then accused by him of racism and given lower grades than predicted for their coursework. Another story here from a woman who complained she learned nothing of substance, was accused of white privilege when she challenged him. These are students paying thousands upon thousands of their hard-earned money that they're going to be paying back for the rest of their lives. And he was completely and utterly taking the fucking piss out of them and defrauding them of a proper education. So look, there was many people damaged by the lies that Jason Arday told for his own personal gain. Does that mean that those people or anyone wanted the sad ending for Jason Arday that he had? No. You hope in that situation that the guy would have a wake-up call and go, you know what, I've really fucked a lot of people over. I've hurt a lot of people here. I'm going to apologize for it. I'm going to try and make it up to people, and I'm going to try and be a better person and learn from these mistakes. Unfortunately, that's not what happened. And there's a lot of blame being pointed online, and I think it's important to tackle that in this video. The media are definitely getting a lot of blame because of the number of stories written about Jason Arday in the last couple of weeks. Now, this is a graphic of how many news stories were posted about Jason Arday. 249 articles from the UK media. The bits in grey here are prior to him resigning. The orange is after resigning, and the red are after he had died. Now you can see there's a lot more orange than anything else. So after he resigned, it actually increased rather than decreasing. And you'd have thought maybe it would have been the other way around, right? He's resigned now. But the thing with the resignation was he doubled down. He didn't take any responsibility. He actually said, you know, I'm a victim of a witch hunt, essentially, and this is all bullshit. Now I'm telling the truth. And maybe if he'd actually come correct at that point and held his hands up, that could have put water on the fire. But also, I think that was when the journalists really started looking into him and realizing, you're not just lying about the plagiarism. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on here that we didn't even realize. And I think him doubling down and them realizing there was more, it was fuel to the fire, especially because this was such a story that touched many different areas of society, and I'll get into that. But there's no other way to say it. The media reaction to this was massive. Now, in response to that, what you could say is this was no ordinary professor. This wasn't just another guy who they hired at Cambridge. This was the youngest black professor ever, and when they appointed him, they knew fine well what they were doing, and they put out a fucking press release. These are a few examples of all the shows that Jason Arday was on after being appointed as the youngest black professor in Cambridge history. Like, they pushed him to the moon because he made Cambridge look great. And it's a tale as old as time that when you court press attention and you want to tell everyone your story, you will increase the interest in your eventual downfall by 1,000%. And I have to admit, when I started looking into him, thinking that this was just a plagiarism row, the more I learned, the more I was like, fucking hell, like it went on and on. It was actually overwhelming just going through the whole story and how many lies he told. And we know what newspapers are like, man. They want to fucking get clicks and sell stories and that. And this guy, he gave them a gold mine because of how much lying he'd done. Does that justify the extent they went to? No. But they had every reason to be interested in this guy. I mean, he was a Cambridge professor, for Christ's sake. Now, when he was outed as a fraud, the head of Cambridge University said, I share the concerns over the Arday appointment. We will now investigate the circumstances around the appointment by the Faculty of Education back in 2022 and his time here at Cambridge since his appointment nearly 4 years ago. The investigation should be thorough and transparent and will be carried out independently by senior academics. So the head of Cambridge University was acting like it was nothing to do with him, as if he wasn't involved in it at all, as if he didn't know what happened there. They propelled him and made him their poster boy, and the minute that he was exposed for the obvious lies that they should have seen a mile off, they dropped him like a stone and let him take the fall. And I would assume that they probably didn't offer him much personal support behind the scenes, given the outcome that we've seen. So I understand why people are pointing the finger at the media, but I also think that people should be pointing the finger at Cambridge University themselves. And there's tweets saying very similar. Jason Arday was exposed as a fraud and a plagiarist, but the real villains are the ones who put him in that position, knowing fine well his story didn't add up. Shame on Cambridge University, the BBC, and all of the others pushing the woke ideology. A sad ending, RIP. Now, one guy who couldn't resist talking about this was Sadiq Khan, who said he was devastated for the family and friends of Jason Arday. He faced an unacceptable public hounding and campaign of abuse. Many Londoners will be angry and upset this evening. Jason Arday was the victim of a pernicious public shaming that other people in his position simply wouldn't have faced. His death was a tragedy, but once again, it should be a wake-up call for all of us. And look, let's be honest what he's getting at there. When he says other people in his position simply wouldn't have faced, he's talking about skin colour. Because Sadiq Khan never misses an opportunity to stir up racial division, in my opinion. And look, plenty of white people, I'm sure, have plagiarised or lied on their CVs, and this hasn't been the result. To some extent, that might be true, but he's deliberately ignoring a massive amount of context in saying that. The Jason Arday story was way bigger than just plagiarism from another professor. You can't directly compare them. Jason Arday was hoisted in front of the media as the poster boy for Cambridge. When they finally discovered his plagiarism, they uncovered a mountain of other lies in his life. It wasn't a case of academic misconduct. This was like lying about being disabled. What the fuck are we talking about here? Lying about raising millions for kids' charities. I mean, like, it's staggering what he said. When people noticed what he was doing, he got solicitors on them, he got police on them, he called them racist. He was a fraudster who was hired for political reasons, which then exposed the education system's failures at the highest level. So to try and boil this down to be like, oh, well, he has different skin colour to another guy who plagiarised. I mean, like, it's a completely different situation. And much like Jason Arday's own claims of racism, Sadiq Khan has not a shred of proof to back that up, which is why he's been very vague in the way he's worded it. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying there's not racists in the media, but let's be real here. Skin colour doesn't save you from these fuckers. Did Caroline Flack not die? You know what I mean? Did that not happen? Many white people have been brutalized by the media. As long as you're next on the menu and they've got something to dig into and to sell papers and to get clicks, they don't give a fuck. Anyone can get it. And the irony is, if Jason Arday had been a white middle class man, he would never have been elevated to that position of power that he got in the fucking first place, because they didn't want to hire white people. They were explicitly clear on that. Diversity is what we're looking for in this job role. You wouldn't have even got the opportunity to be, scrutinized if you're a white man, let alone get the 7-figure book deal. So it's highly ironic. We're talking about racism. And speaking of people like Sadiq Khan, which there's lots of them out there right now who are backing it for Jason Arday, it's funny that they've stepped up and spoken now. Because when he was under extreme scrutiny and it was very clear that he was a complete and utter fraudster, a lot of them not had much to say then, did they? But now he's died. Now we can use that as a form of virtue signalling to further our own narrative. Now we'll speak up for him. All right, I get it. I see how that works. And what they're going to try and do is kind of cover up the situation that this woke ideology within society created for this to happen in the first place, and focus in on the tragedy side of it and not how this happened. Because let's be honest here, if we were only hiring people at Cambridge on merit, he would never have got the job, and he would never have been in a position to have such a fall from grace in the fucking first place that would be that damaging to him. Another reason why DEI is a disease. It encourages bad thinking from people who otherwise wouldn't even notice skin colour. It creates things we didn't even know were going to happen, like this situation. Let's see what other people have been saying about this. There are plenty of scholars with brilliant, original, non-plagiarised PhDs who'll never get a junior academic job, let alone a Cambridge professorship. That's why the Arday case matters. And that's why there is such interest, such outrage about what happened in the first place with Arday, because it's wrong. If you want to sympathise with someone in the Jason Arday case, then feel sorry for the wife and 2 children he abandoned and the students he defrauded. It's just an awful situation, this, as far as I'm concerned. Like, you can still feel sorry for Jason Arday. There's a lot of people who are very empathetic out there, and credit to you, like, just because he did bad things, of course, no one is saying he deserved to have such a sad ending to his life. But I do understand why putting the wife and kids specifically at the top of the list, because they're the ones who now have to carry on and deal with this, and that is fucking brutal. And my heart goes out to them. Jason Arday died, though the cause of death has not been confirmed. Suicide seems likely. I'll say this: the fact that a pathological liar reacted badly to scrutiny does not mean that scrutiny was unwarranted or unfair. Yeah, I mean, it was warranted, it was fair, the interest in the man, but the amount of it, the amount of articles, that's where I understand the case of like, this just went on longer than it needed to, more than it needed to. Does that mean I'm going to put all of the blame on the media and say they entirely caused the situation that happened? I'm not. If Jason Arday had been an honest, decent man, none of this would have ever have happened. But I do think that we can look at that and go, you know what? In future, the media needs to know when to fucking, yeah, you hit your story, you nail the point, then you back off a bit. Because I do think in looking at the numbers of articles, this was overdone. And look, we'll never know if they'd have stopped at 150 articles, would the outcome have been different? Like, we can't know that. I'm just saying it was a lot. I have a nagging suspicion that the people who are condemning the hounding of Jason Arday are themselves about to do an awful lot of hounding. I think that's a very clever take. Like, there's a lot of virtue signalers who, like social justice warriors, who are going to be saying what a victim Jason Arday was, and then they're going to be attacking people themselves at the same fucking time. So look, I think you could put blame in a few different directions here, but ultimately there's no winners. It's a sad fucking situation. Was the media's reporting of this over the top? Yes. Just in terms of the length of time and the amount of articles that came out, it was a lot. Could Jason Arday have poured cold water over this a bit and got his hands around the situation by coming out and admitting the truth instead of acting like this was a big smear campaign, just saying, yeah, look, I fucking lied, I fucked up? I think this would have taken the sting out of it quite a bit, to be honest. Because once you tell everyone the truth, there's nothing to dig anymore. It's out there now. It's done. And let me be clear, they're still calling this a smear campaign now. This wasn't a smear campaign. A smear campaign is insinuating that the media were printing lies to damage his reputation. He did the lying. They were responding with the truth. If he had just told the truth earlier, they wouldn't have had so much ammunition and so much reason to keep on digging and to prove he was a liar. And I see some people acting online like the media should have lied for him to protect him. I mean, that's just insane. I'm sorry, like, he's a grown man. In terms of Cambridge, should he have even had that job in the first place? Fuck no. Of course not. I watched one of his fucking lectures on the last video. It was 40 odd minutes of absolute nonsense. He said nothing of any substance whatsoever the whole time. If I paid money for that, I'd be fucking raging. The only reason he was in that job was for the benefit of the image of Cambridge University. That's it. He was in no way qualified. There were a million red flags that they should have identified beforehand, but they didn't care. And they've been exposed big time for not giving two shits about their education that they provide their students with. I mean, their reputation is in tatters. A Cambridge degree used to mean something like 2 weeks ago. When it all came crashing down around him, they just let him take the fall, which I think was very cowardly on the part of Cambridge University. But ultimately, if he didn't lie about everything, none of this would have fucking happened. This was a grown man who not just cheated people and lied to people, but whenever anyone questioned it, who were right to question it, he sent the law after them. He sent solicitors after them. He called them racists. What if one of them journalists who accused of being a racist was, so shamed by it and that it got the media's attention? What if he'd committed suicide? Would he have given a fuck? I doubt it. Not by the way he was behaving. He didn't care. He'd stop at nothing so that you get off his case. That's all he cared about. Let me continue with my lying and get the fuck out the way. As much as it's a terrible shame how this has ended, he did not behave like a victim. He wasn't a victim. He created this situation. He did bad things and he threatened to demonize people if they complained about it. And what's fucking sad if with him having a family is there was a way out of this. No one forced him to do this. He could have owned up as a grown-ass man and said, I fucked up. I got too in love with everyone's sympathy and adulation, and I went down a fucking stupid road and I made a lot of mistakes, but I'm holding my hands up and I'm apologizing. And he didn't have the balls for it. And I'm sorry to say that about a guy who's no longer with us, but I told you at the start, just because people die doesn't mean we romanticize them and pretend that they're someone that they're not. I'm telling you the fucking truth. That's the way it went. And the reason I'm talking frankly like this is because this man had kids, and that bothers me. That when you've got kids, you brave anything for them. And this was the time where you face up to all of the shit you've said, all the people who've been impacted by it, and you take it on the chin like a man. And I think the decision he made was a clear and massive indication of the level of guilt that was there. And I think shame is a very painful thing, and I get that. I have sympathy for the level of shame that he must have felt. And I also think the contrast of the life he was facing versus the life he'd been living would have been a hell of a painful experience. To go from the most respected and adored first black professor in Cambridge history with all the money and all the adulation to being a fraud, that's a hell of a fall. That's a big drop from grace, that big time. And again, if just a few fuckers at Cambridge had asked a few more questions and actually hired someone based on merit, this wouldn't have happened. But he was the one who made those decisions. And from the outside looking in, it looks like that the image that he'd built up for himself, that fake life that he'd created with all those lies, I guess that was more important to him than living on for those kids. Because actions speak louder than words. I don't understand the decision he made at all in this situation. I've been cancelled. Millions of views, people fucking slagging you off, everyone saying how shit you are, how horrible you are. It's horrible. I just made a 30-second stupid drug joke. I wasn't living a lie and defrauding people. It's not nice. I get it. No one knows more than me. But the love that you have for the people around you, especially your children, that should give you the strength to not make a bad situation worse and adding a whole bunch of suffering to your kid's life. And after the way he treated people, to not even try and fix the situation, at least try and see before you do something that dramatic. Apologize, come clean, hold your hands up, beg for forgiveness. He didn't even attempt to. He just denied it and said, oh, it's a witch hunt, and then took that decision. I mean, fuck me. Leaving his kids alone, without his love, without his protection, to face a storm that he created. Let's be honest, he did this, he started this, and now they've got to go through this without him. I've got a lot of sympathy for people who have committed suicide and been mentally ill. I've been there, seen it. I've dealt with that in my life. I've spoken about it hundreds of times online. This was not a mentally ill man. I don't care what anyone says. He was very much of sound mind and body, in that he knew he was lying. He knew that when people were raising the alarm on him, he was putting the law on them. He was getting the solicitors on them. He was very conscious of holding this secret together and to continue living this lie because it benefited him. This wasn't a man who thought he was the second coming of Jesus and he was losing his mind. Not at all. He knew what he was doing and he was very calculated about it. So this wasn't mental illness. This was a man who got caught and took a way out that I just really disagree with in this situation, in my opinion. And I never talk about suicide like this, but I think in this case, it's quite obvious that's the way it was. My heart goes out to his kids and his family. I think it's fucking awful. And I wish he'd had the strength to get through it for them, because that's what a dad's supposed to do, especially when he's done wrong. But look, that's all I've got to say for today. A fucking sad story, just tragic. Let us know what you thought of it all in the comments below. If you haven't already, hit that like button, subscribe. I'll see you on the next one.